Near the end of last summer, I built a giant ecosystem pond with the help of my friends at Aquascape. Here's a quick recap of what's happened since. I added a group of common and comet goldfish who enjoyed it for the remainder of the season. As winter set in, the pond was left to settle for a few months. Eventually spring arrived, and that's when things truly began developing. The fish overwintered well, but it was difficult to see them through cloudy water. This was the result of mud runoff from the construction process, which also introduced excess nutrients resulting in algae. I manually removed and pressure washed what I could, but to start properly remediating the issue, I planted some grass on the right side. As the days warmed, many animals were encouraged to start using this environment as well. Green frogs basked, deer enjoyed the ambiance, and more. A pair of eastern phoebe were hard at work, building a nest over the new vantage point of the pond, hoping to proliferate. The same began happening in and around the waters as well. Spring rains encouraged the frogs to migrate to the pond and sing their songs. First, a handful of male spring peepers were calling out, hoping to attract mates, with American toads not far behind. Their calls were yet to be reciprocated. That said, the phoebes were successful, and at work incubating a brood of little eggs, which is where we left off. Although valiant, their efforts were being challenged. Within the nest were 4 pristine eggs. 3 looked very clean, while the other was covered in dirt. Not so. Both parents worked together, incubating the eggs in shifts. There's some idle time between, which gave a parasite free access to tamper with their nest. This egg here actually belongs to a completely different species, the brown-headed cowbird. These are what's considered a brood parasite. Rather than build their own nests, they instead lay in others. The host birds then raise the cowbirds as their own if they don't recognize the eggs as foreign objects. However, it's not that simple. Cowbirds usually hatch and develop faster, outcompeting the initial brood. For now, there was no telling what would happen here, but I did notice something else when reviewing the time-lapse footage. Did you catch that? It happened quickly, but if we slow things down, you'll see exactly what occurred. That's the female cowbird, and it returned to the nest to give her baby an upper hand via less competition. Shortly after this robbery, Mom returned, completely unaware of what just occurred. I was absolutely shocked to see this, but something just below their nest caught my eye as well, a ringneck snake. These tiny snakes spend most of their time underground, so this was a pleasant surprise. It likely emerged from nearby leaf litter to bask. However, I didn't want to leave it here because I was doing work in the area, so I moved it to a safer location. Spring rains continued rolling through the lands. As the thunder subsided, the sounds of the frogs permeated the airwaves once more, and I swear the volume was turned up. I suppose with a few days under their belt, the peepers were at full strength. Even so, there didn't appear to be any mates. The toads were calling out as well, and the competition was fierce. They're generally more males than females, so they are persistent through necessity. Any movement in the water could be a potential mate, so they're quick to latch on. Even if that's on each other, but a quick squeak lets them know to back off. However, all their hard work finally paid off because a female was in their midst. She was unimpressed with the ones around her though, and escaped their radar underwater. It had to have happened as soon as she surfaced, because before I realized it, a link up or what's known as amplexus occurred. I was hopeful this pair would be successful. Rains continued the following day, creating the perfect backdrop for the toads to continue doing their thing. The pair from before still hadn't reproduced. Amplexus can last for a while though, and perhaps the location wasn't ideal. Luckily the males are smaller, so it was easy for her to cart him around in search of a better location. As she did, the weather picked up, and this continued for a few days. These rains, which ushered in the frogs to begin with, caused things to cool off in the days to follow, and thus the symphony subsided. Only a single toad remained, eagerly waiting for it to start again. You'll see that my efforts to minimize mud runoff were beginning to work too. Despite days of rain, the water was actually pretty clear. Unfortunately, it was still too cold to feed the fish, but they certainly remembered what this means. What I was curious about though was whether or not the toads from the other day were successful. They must have been, because a huge cluster of eggs was wrapped around the plants where I last saw them. That wasn't all. I found a second cluster up in the waterfalls. So I am ecstatic right now because the toads were successful. Right down here in the intake bay are, I guess, thousands of toad eggs all wrapped around these plants here. So these ones should be good. Their only concern really is the fish, but I don't really think that they'll bother with them, so I'll leave those ones be. However, there was also a bunch of them up here in the wetlands filter, right in a quiet corner. My concern with this area though is that as the tadpoles make their way out of there, they could potentially wind up all the way over here into the waterfalls and who knows where. So I think what I would like to do, just to ensure their success is as high as possible, is to make a little dam around here just to kind of keep them secluded to this little area. So that's exactly what I did. I created a little dam around the eggs to give them a better chance. It wasn't pretty, but I knew this was something I'd have to get used to. I knew it would take time for them to hatch and develop into toadlets. Meanwhile, a different species took up residence down in the basin, water striders. These little predators effortlessly glide across the water's surface, searching for prey. I've always found them to be extremely captivating and graceful. As I observed them skating back and forth, I heard something new. It happened a few times, and just as I discovered where it came from, it stopped. Up in the weeping cherry tree was a new frog in town, a gray tree frog. Its muted coloration camouflaged it perfectly on this branch. However, my presence must have made it bashful, because it refused to call again, holding this position well into the evening. I had done very little around the pond until then. It drove me nuts, but I still wasn't ready for much. My overall plan was to create usable recreation areas within designated pockets of plants and other features for the animals. That would take time to create, but I collected a few plants to begin moving in the right direction. However, this entire area was excavated beyond being usable for its intended purpose. I had to raise everything by about a foot to fix that. I wouldn't do it all at once because I worked by hand. In the meantime, I collected soil from areas with too much that I used to elevate the upper portion of the seating area. This platform specifically was designated for a swinging bench. I measured and excavated for that before setting the posts. A few weeks prior, I also seeded the lawn with dandelions. It was coming together, but my long-term plans for it would be much different than this. All the while, the deer passed through, and one of the phoebe watched from the fence. I also heard the tree frog again, and found him in one of the most unexpected places, behind the old ledger board. This foreshadowed what was the most lively evening in the pond's existence thus far. The night began as before, with toads and peepers calling for mates. However, something was different. There were at least 50 toads scattered around, which was significantly more than previous nights. Then I saw her. This little lady was lured in, quickly making her way to the breeding grounds. She dove deep into the water, and the boys sensed her movement, but they just missed her. While attempting to track her down, I noticed something bizarre. A toad was latched onto a green frog, with another sitting nearby. Captivated by confusion, I completely missed this pair connecting. The peeper's efforts finally paid off as well, because a female was on the scene. That said, I never saw or documented any matches. There did appear to be more peepers though, many of which were scattered in the grass. There was a green frog among them too, which I imagine was hunting them down, but I can't confirm with certainty. After making its way over to this rock, the gray tree frog began calling out too. When I went to get a closer look, I discovered someone I was not expecting to see, an American bullfrog. It was quite young, and likely migrated here sometime earlier because I hadn't seen any others since the pond was built. Anyway, it was awesome to get a better look at the tree frog. Its camouflage was impeccable. Wouldn't you agree that it looks just like a piece of lichen on the rock? There were well over 80 frogs in or around the waters on this evening alone. In a way, it was all kind of serendipitous, because this was the final night of the toad's breeding season. The pairs just had to finish reproducing the following day. The process takes a while because the female lays thousands of eggs that the male fertilizes, with as many as 20,000. This was the last of 9 confirmed clutches, which means there were upwards of 180,000 eggs within the pond. The survival rate of frogs and toads that make it to adulthood to breed is estimated to only be around 1%. That's not very many, even with a good starting point. This all happened over a few weeks, so despite these ones being less than a day old, the others were already emerging as free-swimming tadpoles. Their long and challenging journey into toadhood was only just beginning. They weren't the only hatchlings, though. While all of that unfolded, the phoebe were feverishly watching over their nest. You'll see that they slowly rotate the eggs around the nest during the incubation process, which ensures the embryos develop properly. As expected, the cowbird was the first to emerge from the confines of its egg. The phoebe raised the bird as their own, unaware of what they were actually doing. The others started hatching days later, but by the time they did, the cowbird was already well grown. These developed alongside it for the majority of its time in the nest, but the size discrepancy took a toll. Eventually, they were smothered out. The same would happen to the third when it finally hatched. As the only remaining nestling with no competition, the cowbird grew even faster. When it gained enough strength to stand and observe its surroundings, instincts kicked in and it flew away, leaving the phoebes with nothing but an empty nest. I knew this pond would become an ecosystem, but I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. The waters became a safe space for hundreds of frogs to congregate and reproduce. The phoebe hoped for the same, but an opportunistic observer had different ideas. Thus, nature takes its course, but their story isn't over yet. Even so, things were hardly beginning. I know you've heard some of my schemes thus far, but there's so much more I've yet to expose. This only scratches the surface of how the pond's been used by wildlife and what I've done to it. All in due time as this series continues to unfold, Serpa Squad. See you next time.